Hello and welcome to Yeshiva University's Yom HaShoah Commemoration 2020. Today, we remember not only all those lost, but also those who have survived and fought through endless amounts of tragedy to further the Jewish people. We are logged in today on Zoom, since a physical gathering is simply impossible. Although we are so far apart, we stand together as one to remember the importance of this day in all of our lives. We, the members of SHEM, the Student Holocaust Education Movement, were determined from the beginning of the year to organize a meaningful commemoration that can capture the magnitude of the day. Despite the radical change in all of our schedules and daily lives, that did not stop us from planning a truly meaningful commemoration that can be shared together as one community in one virtual auditorium. And now I would like to introduce current Yeshiva University student Moshe Stewart to sing the national anthem, followed by Hatikva, and the ceremonious sirens sounded to remember all of those lost.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Kolod balevav penima nefesh Yehudi omiya ufate mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia. O lo avda tikvatenu Hatikva bat shnot apayim liyotam chofshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion b'Yerushalayim ay liyotam chofshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion b'Yerushalayim.
Now it would be my honor to introduce Rabbi Dr. JJ Schacter, Senior Scholar at the YU Center for the Jewish Future and University Professor of Jewish History and Thought.
I want to thank you, Isaac, very much for the introduction. I am deeply humbled and deeply honored to have the opportunity to participate this evening, to have been invited to be here together with you on this most solemn and most important occasion. And it's a great honor for me to share the program with Dr. Moshe Avital, as well as with President Ari Berman. Zachar eis asher asa lecha Amalek baderech b'tzeischa miMitzrayim. We have an obligation to remember, and we are called upon to remember. And tonight is a fulfillment of that mandate and the commandment to remember. We remember what happened to Achenu B'nai Yisrael during the years of the Shoah. And we also remember, particularly this year on the 75th anniversary of the end of the war and of the liberation of the camps, we remember not only what happened during the war, but we remember after the war. We remember the resilience, and we remember the faith after and in spite of and in the face of enormous adversity. Certainly issues that are relevant to us in our way, me'inyana diyoma. I want to begin by expressing our collective thanks to the entire board of SHEM for the extraordinary leadership that they have demonstrated to put together the program this evening. And in particular, I want to thank Isaac Gore and Moshe Stewart, Sophie Gordon, Tanya Bachbat, those who are participating in the program itself. Because it's the 75th anniversary of the liberation and the end of the war, I want to focus on a liberator. And I was asked to focus on the story of my late father, Zichrono Livracha, Rabbi Herschel Schachter, who was the first American Jewish chaplain to enter into the concentration camps as a soldier and liberated the Buchenwald concentration camp on April 11th, not very long ago, 75 years ago, in 1945. My father, Zichrono Livracha, was born in Brooklyn. He attended Yeshiva Chaim Berlin for elementary school and Mesivta Torah V'das for high school, and then he came to Yeshiva College. It's a long history with Yeshiva. Graduated in the class of 38, went on for smicha, studied with Rab Moshe Soloveitchik. And then after Rab Moshe passed away, was the first one to receive smicha from Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik. Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik signed on more smicha documents than anyone else in the totality of Jewish history. He gave smicha to some 2,500 rabbis. And my father was the first, and we always had in our family very close relationship with Rabbi Soloveitchik. He became a rabbi in Stamford, Connecticut, and then he enlisted in the army. He wanted to fight for America, and he wanted to fight for Jews. I'd like to ask Marjorie to put the first picture up, please. He comes to the army, spends some time around the United States, and then he makes his way across the ocean to Europe. And on April 11th, 1945, he liberates the Buchenwald concentration camp. And this defined the narrative of his childhood. And this defined the narrative of my childhood. What I'd like to do is briefly share some written stories, and I also want to share an oral story with you to give you a sense of facing adversity, of resilience, and of faith after horror. I want to begin with a paragraph in the book that was written by Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, the former chief rabbi of Israel, the current chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, who wrote his memoirs. He published them first in Hebrew and then in English translation. And he was a little boy in Buchenwald when my father came, and they had an encounter with one another. And after that encounter, he writes how he followed my father from barracks to barracks. And my father was shouting out in Yiddish, Yidden, ihr seid frei. Jews, you're free. You're liberated. The inmates gazed at him wrote Rabbi Lau, incredulous, as if to ask, who is this crazy Meshugana standing there in a uniform screaming in Yiddish? After visiting all the bunkers, Rabbi Schachter helped me find Naftali. Naftali was an older brother of Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, who watched him and who cared for him and who saved him. We went to the Buchenwald hospital where my brother was being treated for typhoid fever. My name is Herschel Schachter, he said, introducing himself to Naftali. I'm the army rabbi for the division that liberated Buchenwald. He took out several cans of orange juice from his bag. I know who you are. I'm going to help you and everything will be all right, he reassured Naftali. And he concluded with a mazel tov, congratulations. We've gone from avdus to cherus, from slavery to freedom, referring to the story of the Exodus. Naftali, the older brother of Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, passed away just a few years ago. Names Rabbi Herschel Schachter as the first person to offer him relief after liberation, and says that the rabbi restored his confidence in himself and in humanity. Faith after adversity, not just faith in God, but faith in humanity, faith in the ability to live a life of a future. I want to say a word about Moshe Avital. You're going to be hearing from him shortly. He was in Buchenwald. My father liberated him. I hope he'll mention it at some point during the course of his presentation. We had not known about him as children. We had not heard of him. We heard of others. Our father spoke often about survivors. The greatest, most incredible, indelible impression of my youth were meeting survivors whose lives he saved. But somehow Moshe Avital was not on the radar screen. And then my father died. He passed away, and our family is sitting Shiva 7 years ago. And the place is packed. And in walks a small man. We didn't know who he was. And he slowly made his way to the front next to my mother and to me and to my sister. And he sits down. And he looks at us and he says, I was there. And everybody was quiet. The entire room, 100 people, absolute silence. I was there. And he told us what our father had done in order to help him. He is a hero, Moshe Avital. You're privileged to be able to hear his story. I want to conclude with an oral story that I heard from Rabbi Dr. Daniel Hershkowitz. Rabbi Dr. Daniel Hershkowitz was a Rav in Haifa for many years. He joined the Israeli government. He became the Minister of Space Exploration. And then most recently, he was the president of Bar Ilan University. He came to visit my old shul, the Jewish Center on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and he was there for his Shabbos. And at Shalashudas, he said, let me tell you a little bit about why I went into Jewish communal service. Why am I devoting my life to the Jewish people? He said, my father was a Holocaust survivor, and my father was in Buchenwald. And on April 11th, the American Army came and liberated Buchenwald, and there was an American Army chaplain. And his name was Rabbi Schachter. He said, I don't know if any of you ever heard of him. And it was a little bit ridiculous because it was a shul that I served for 20 years, and my father would come there all the time. Everybody knew who he was. But Hershkowitz didn't know that. He said, let me tell you a story. As soon as the liberation happened, Rabbi Schachter comes in with other troops, and he walks into the middle of the open area, and everybody gathers around him. And he's a little guy, and he's wearing an American Army uniform, and they didn't know what to do with that. Because yesterday an Army uniform was death. Yesterday an Army uniform was torture, was destruction. So they're looking and they're frightened and they don't know. And then they see the Magen David and they see the Aseres HaDibros on his lapel. Somehow this uniform is different than other uniforms. Says Rabbi Dr. Herschkowitz, and they begin to gather around, and all of a sudden the uniform starts to talk in Yiddish. Jeden, Jeden is en frei. Jeden, Jeden, was darf dir? What do you need? How can I help you? And they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. What do you mean, how can you help me? After what they had gone through. And Herschkowitz says, finally, my father stepped up. He was 17 years old. He said, I know what you could do for me. He said, when I came to Buchenwald, I had my tefillin with me. I had my tefillin with me. And then they found my tefillin. And he said, you can imagine what they did to me. You can only begin to imagine what they did to me. But I survived. It's been a month since I put on tefillin. Maybe you have a pair of tefillin for me. Maybe you have a pair of tefillin for me. Stop. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin in Perek Chelek. The Gemara wants to know, Mesim She'echiyeh Yecheskel. We read in the Haftorah over Pesach about the Valley of the Dry Bones, the Atzomos HaYeveshos, and the Gemara picks up where the Navi Yecheskel leaves off. So what happened to these dry bones that somehow came to life in the valley? Where did they go? What was the rest of the story? They stood up and they died. Rabbi Elazar ben Osher Rabbi Yosef Glili Omer, Mesim Shechye Yecheskel Alu L'Eretz Yisrael, V'nasu Nashim V'olidu Banim Ubanos. You know what happened to them? They left, they got up, they went to Israel, and they created families. Amad Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira al Raglov, V'amar ani mi b'nei b'neihem. I am one of their grandchildren. V'halolu tefillin. She'iniach li aviyabo mehem. And here are the tefillin that my Zaidi left for me. My father interpreted this as three categories of people who survived the Shoah. Mesim, Shehechiyeh, Yecheskel. First category are those who got up and they said, Shira, thank you very much, Umesu. And they left the Jewish people. They were traumatized. They could no longer hitch their wagon to the caravan of Jewish destiny. They were done, it was over. And I don't blame them, and I don't judge them. I have no idea what I would have done. After what they saw, they simply did not want to be part of a living Jewish community. And I don't judge them for a second, but that's one category. The second category, Alu L'Eretz Yisrael, V'olidu Banim Ubanos. They went to Israel, they built a state, they created families, a Jewish future. 600,000 Jews lived in Israel in May of 1948 when the state was announced. Fully 25%, 150,000 Jews were survivors. They created the state, unbelievable. But even that's not enough. Ahmad, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, yeah, you want to create the state. You want to create a Jewish future. Medinat Yisrael, unbelievable. Miracle. Reshit Smichat Geulatenu. But at the end of the day, what will ensure our survival is holding up the tefillin from the Zaidi, holding up the Shabbos candles, holding up the Hanukkah menorah, from people who went through hell in order to be able to live and to die as Jews, who are Moser Nefesh for Judaism. These are the ones who bequeath to us, after what they've gone through, resilience and faith after adversity. This is the key to our future. V'halolu tefillin. Says Danny Hershkowitz, his father, I need tefillin. Maybe you have tefillin. And Hershkowitz says that my father bent down into his satchel and he took out his own pair of tefillin and he gave it to his father and he said, here's a pair of tefillin. And Hershkowitz said, somebody who was prepared to give away his own pair of tefillin to a stranger, to a little kid, was so inspiring to me that I decided that I want to live my life with that value. He said, when I was bar mitzvah in Haifa, I wore those tefillin. This is faith after adversity. This is what it means to be able to continue to have a commitment under the most difficult circumstances, to following a Masorah, to following a tradition. And so tonight we remember the tragedy. Tonight we remember the sadness. Tonight there's a siren, and tonight there are candles. And tonight it's a night of Zachar, Es Asher Asa Lecha Amalek. But also 75 years later, it's a night of redoubling our commitment to maintaining our faith and our traditions. That's what you do. You are students in an extraordinary institution. You have decided to join this institution, to be trained and to be elevated and to be inspired and to be educated in this institution because you understand the power, the centrality, the importance, the value of living significantly, deeply enhanced, Jewishly meaningful lives. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us the koach and the strength. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us the faith to be able to continue in our own time in spite of all this adversity, as we remember those in the past who were able to put one foot in front of another and to be able to assert their connection to Jewish life and to Jewish destiny, and to pass that on to children, to grandchildren, to great-grandchildren, at sof kol hadoros, until and continuing through the totality of Jewish and world history.
Erev Tov, good evening. Tonight we have the extraordinary privilege to hear from survivor and venerable educator, Dr. Moshe Avital. It is an honor to have him address the Yeshiva University community on this Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura. Dr. Avital is a true inspiration to all. His passion for Israel, Jewish education, and devotion to family and faith has accompanied him throughout his life. I am grateful that before this terrible pandemic that has altered all of our lives, I had the wonderful opportunity to meet with Dr. and Mrs. Avital at their home. At this meeting, I learned first all about his amazing life and story of survival. Shortly, we will hear from Dr. Avital about his life before, during, and after World War II, and many of the lessons he learned from the Shoah and other life experiences. Before we do so, I want to take a moment to highlight some of his many accomplishments after the war. A veteran of the Haganah and Sahel, Dr. Avital fought in both the 1948 War of Independence and the 1956 Sinai Campaign. He's a proud alum of Yeshiva University, having earned with honors a BA, MS in education, and PhD in Hebrew literature. During his distinguished professional career, which spanned more than half a century, Dr. Avital served in various educational positions, both in Israel and the diaspora. He was the head principal of 4 Hebrew schools, director of the Department of Education and Culture of the World Zionist Organization for Israel, director of Education and Culture at the Jewish Agency for Israel American Section, and director of Camp Yavne and Camp Masad. A regular contributor to Hatzofeh, a daily newspaper in Israel, as well as to Hadoar, which was a weekly Hebrew magazine in the United States, Dr. Avital is a primary founder of the Chidon HaTanach. In 1977, Dr. Avital served as the official translator for the ABC network for the proceedings of Anwar Sadat's historic trip to Israel, and later as the translator for Menachem Begin upon his visit to Egypt. He frequently corresponded with David Ben-Gurion and Menachem Begin about Jewish education in the US. Dr. Avital is extremely passionate in sharing his story and frequently speaks at local community centers, museums, schools, and synagogues. He has been interviewed by the public broadcasting station in Nagasaki, Japan, the Spielberg Group, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, the History Channel, Names Not Numbers, and many other organizations. He speaks half a dozen languages and has translated 10 Hebrew Kabbalah books into English. A renowned author of 16 books, Dr. Avital has written on topics including the Holocaust, Israel and Zionism, Jewish education, American Jewry, commentaries on the Bible, Jewish personalities, prayer, and holidays. Of his 16 books, he has written 4 on the Holocaust. They are Not to Forget, Impossible to Forgive, a reflection of Dr. Avital's personal experiences before, during, and after the Holocaust. The second, The Failure of Man and the Enigma of God's Silence, which discusses the penetrating questions and answers on how and why the Holocaust happened. The third, And There Was Courage, which is a compilation of stories of Jewish valor and heroism during the Holocaust. And the fourth, Hope, Faith, and Resilience, an examination of how faith in God empowered survivors. Dr. Avital is finishing his 5th book on the Holocaust, titled Can There Be Forgiveness for the Holocaust? His books can be purchased from his website, mosheavital.com. In spite of all of his accomplishments, his ultimate pride and joy in his life is his family. Married to the love of his life, Anita Herschel Avital, he is the father of 3 daughters, grandfather of 11, and great-grandfather of 2. He describes his grandchildren as Yaldei HaNisim, children of miracles, and as the greatest revenge against the Jewish people's enemies. The film of Dr. Moshe Avital that we will shortly view is part of Names Not Numbers, a copyrighted oral history film documentary project created by educator Tova Fish Rosenberg. This project transforms traditional history lessons into a lively, interactive, non-traditional program that involves individuals who have actually lived through the history being taught. Students acquire documentary interviewing techniques, filmmaking skills, interview and film eyewitnesses, and ultimately create an oral history film documentary that will become a permanent part of the National Library of Israel, Yad Vashem, and Yeshiva University's Gottesman Library. We extend our appreciation to Dr. Rosenberg for allowing Yeshiva University to include it into our Yom HaShoah commemoration. With no further ado, Dr. Moshe Avital.
My name is Moshe Avital. I was born in a shtetl, a town called Bilka in eastern Czechoslovakia on July 18, 1928. We were a large family. We were 11 children. I was the youngest. There were 6 brothers and 5 sisters. My father, Alav Shalom, Zichrono Libracha, was a shochet and the chazan of the town. My mother was a homemaker. She was the best. He was a person that was very much devoted to the community. Up until the war, everybody was living peacefully. There were here and there some incidents, but as a whole, it was there were no anti-Semitic outbreaks. The Jews had a very good life. We didn't have much of a relationship with the local people that lived in Bilka. Under the surface, there was anti-Semitism, but they didn't show it really. The Shabbos and the Yomim Tovim were something unusual. You can imagine that 13 nefashot were sitting down around the table at home, and the singing of Zmirot and the Divrei Torah that the older boys were telling each and so on. I loved the high holidays melodies. So my father had special melodies for Zochreinu L'chaim. Zochreinu Oy L'chaim. The there was a cobbler in Bilka, a Jewish man by the name of Benjamin Klein. A wonderful man. I used to go to him with my shoes. As he was going near a bridge, which was still a distance to his house, there were shots. The Hungarians were shooting at the Ukrainians, and he was shot in his head. This was the first encounter, the first victim of the Hungarians when they came into Bilka. They took us by boxcars. Except my two brothers, everybody was together, and also I had also a brother that left for Israel, for Palestine, in 1937. The ghetto was surrounded by barbed wire and Hungarian police and soldiers. We received only once a day, we received some soup. Otherwise, it was a struggle to find food. We were taken to the ghetto right after Pesach. So in our family, we still had matzahs. So we took the matzah and we broke them into pieces and we took them with us. And that lasted. So my mother used to make all kinds of goodies from the matzah. There were 15,000 Jews in this ghetto from all the towns around Berehava. We were in the ghetto for 2 months. One day, they told us that we are going to be taken to a more secure place because the Russian army is coming closer, which was a lie. They took us to the train station where there were boxcars, and they pushed in 100 people into each boxcar, and they put 2 containers on each boxcar, one with water and one for human waste. And they closed the door, and the train started moving. The doors opened up, and 2 high-ranking officers, a Hungarian officer and an SS officer, announced on the loudspeaker, and they said, "From this moment on, you are under the command of the German army." On the 5th day, the train stopped, and they look out again, and they see a name that they have never seen before. And they ask around in the wagon, anybody ever heard the name Auschwitz? We lined up, and this was the last time I saw my mother, Alea Shalom, my 5 sisters, and 6 children, nephews and nieces, because 2 sisters were married. There were officers there, and one of them was Dr. Joseph Mengele. And he was just motioning with his finger, left and right. When my father was standing in front of him, he motioned to him to go to the left. My brother Joseph, he motioned to him to go to the right. And then when I stood in front of him, he hesitated what to do with me. But finally, he motioned for me to go to the right. So I ran over to my brother. Most of my friends from my hometown, from Bilka, that he motioned to them to go to the left. Why they went there and he sent me over here, at that moment I surely didn't know. But I've been thinking about this all along. And I thought to myself that this must be Zchut Avot. After we were sorted out, they told us to line up in rows of 5. And they told us to start marching. We marched and we went through the sign Arbeit macht frei, which means workers' liberty. From there, we were taken to the next room. In the next room, they had barbers, prisoners that have been there from before. And they shaved us from head to toe. They took us inside the camp into a huge barrack, 1,000 prisoners. And when we walked in, there were on both sides of the walls shelves, 3 stories high. And these were going to be our beds. We did construction. We did cleaning in the camp. We went to the train station where we loaded and unloaded for the Germans all kinds of equipment. These were the things that we did. There were very few Jews who risked their lives in order to have a minyan, let's say. They stood in the corner of the barrack and they were watching all over to see if a guard is coming or something like that, or the couples that they shouldn't realize what they are doing. We remembered the dates. We knew when it's Shabbat, we knew when the holidays are, and there were some people that made a calendar in camp, and they kept it, they were hiding it in order to know what holidays are. Religion was something that gave you hope. If you were a religious person, you were hoping, you had faith that this will also pass. In Auschwitz, I was for 2 months with my brother, and they took us to the train station, and there they loaded us into a train, and the train moved. We didn't know where we are going, but where did we arrive? In Ploshov. In Ploshov, I was with my brother for 4 months. One night, in the middle of the night, they told us to line up for the roll call. I was in one row, and my brother was like 2 or 3 rows away. Then came a SS officer, and he started to count. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, above face. And they took me with this group to the train station, and that's the last time I saw my brother. When this happened, I was crying bitterly because I had somebody to cry on his shoulders, as to say, and this time I was alone. We were loaded on this train and sent to another camp. We arrived in Grossrosen, that's in Silesia, between Poland and Germany. We were only 2 weeks because it was a transit camp, and we were sent not far from there to a camp called Bolkenheim. I was sent to work in an airplane factory in the town of Breslau, which was 8 kilometers from the camp. There was a rabbi from Hungary, his name was Yitzchak. He worked with me in that factory. He was trying to everybody to give them hope. And he was telling them, this will be over soon. Let's not lose hope. The commandant used to come in to count the prisoners. He came out to the roll call, and he says to him, Herr Rabbiner. He knew that he was a rabbi, which means Rabbi Sir. Where is your God? And Rabbi Yitzchak motions to heaven. God is in heaven. And he started to scream sarcastically, no, I am your God. I can do with you whatever I want. And he threw him down to the ground and stepped on him with his boots until he stopped moving. And then he gave an order to take him away. A few hours later, he died. That night, most of the prisoners in our barrack, after we came back from work, were sitting. Everybody was very sad, and we were discussing the idea, where was God at that moment? This ferocious Nazi was talking against God, and nothing happened. And this discussion went on for months and months. I remember every little thing that was discussed then. I was brought up in a religious home, and I was brought up that there will be a redemption one day, that God is going to free the Jews and is going to bring them to Eretz Israel. And also I knew that I had a brother in Israel, so that gave me some hope. After 4 months in Balkenheim, one morning, we were told that they're evacuating the camp because the Russians are coming, which this time was true. And they lined us up, 10,000 prisoners. The snow was coming down, something terrible. It was 20 below zero. And we wore only those striped pajamas like. We didn't have any coats. We wore the wooden shoes. We didn't have any food, nothing. We were forced to go. And we marched like robots. Buchenwald had a barrack for children. It was a unique thing because in most of the camps they didn't keep the children, they killed them. I was in Buchenwald from the beginning of March until April 11th. On April 7th, the command in Buchenwald received an order to annihilate all the prisoners. There were 80,000 prisoners in Buchenwald then. 4 days before liberation, they started to empty out the camp, barrack by barrack. They took every prisoner of that barrack and they took him into the forest. Now, Buchenwald had a big, big forest. Buchwald means birch trees. It's a forest of birch trees. And inside the forest were trucks with machine guns, and the SS were shooting the prisoners as soon as they were brought there. Just before we reached the gate, the sirens started to wail as if they were crying. And the SS closed the gates and they ran for cover. Suddenly, 3 American tanks with soldiers and a jeep where Rabbi Herschel Schachter from Yeshiva University, who was a chaplain, came into the camp. He came into our barrack and he said in Yiddish, Yiddische Kinder, ihr seid frei. Jewish children, you are free. And that's how we were liberated. A group of Jews from France came to Buchenwald and they decided to take the children of Buchenwald to France for recuperation in a village called Ecouy. And there we had a wonderful time. In Ecouy we were for 2 months. And while we were there, one night, 3 soldiers of the Jewish brigade came to visit us. And he said that soon we are going to declare a Jewish state. And he asked who would like to go to Palestine. And 350 of us decided that we want to go. We were loaded on this freight ship where they had already a few hundred teenagers from another concentration camp. On the 10th day, from a distance, we saw the Carmel Mountains. The joy was overflowing. Everybody was so happy that finally, we are reaching our goal. We are coming to the land of Israel. We came to Haifa. There they forced us off the ship. They put us on trucks and brought us to Atlit, a prisoner camp. The Jewish Agency for Israel were allowed to go into the camp. And they came in, they made a list of all the Olim that came. And they announced that night all the names of those that arrived in Atlit. And they mentioned my name, which was then Moshe Lifshitz, a person from my hometown, Bilka, lived also in Jerusalem, not far from my brother. And he heard that Moshe Lifshitz arrived in Atlit. The next morning, my brother and this landsman came to Atlit, and they were standing near the gate because the British wouldn't let them in. And they saw somebody walking around in the camp. They called them over, and they told them, please go and look for Moshe Lifshitz. I was lying in the barrack on the bed, and somebody comes in and yells out, who's Moshe Lifshitz? And I say, I am. He says, your brother's at the gate. You can imagine. And I ran to the gate, and I recognized him right away because he was an adult when he left, but he didn't recognize me. And he started to ask me questions. Who was my father, what his name was, my mother's name, the names of the brothers and sisters, and the names of the neighbors, and all kinds of questions. And then he realized that it's me. And he said to me that he's going to do whatever he can to free me. In the middle of the night, somebody shook me. And he says, get up, we came to free you. My message is very simple and clear. Every Jewish child has to keep in mind that 1.5 million Jewish children died, and we have to replace them.
Last question. If you could speak to your parents today, what would you say to them?
I will tell them that I miss them. That I'm glad that I'm a part of the family, that they were wonderful to me, and that we are continuing their legacy. And I will also tell them that we have 11 grandchildren, and we were 11 brothers and sisters. That's symbolic that we are continuing, and that the SHEM among the nations will never be able to destroy us.
Now it would be my honor to introduce Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman, President of Yeshiva University, to share a few words.
So hard to even think of words after hearing Moshe Avital and hearing him tell his story. Such a Kiddush Hashem, a symbol of everything that we're about. It's my deep honor to speak in the presence of Rebbe Mori, Rabbi Dr. JJ Schacter, on this same program. I know that Rabbi Schachter has to leave shortly, and I thank him so much for being here with us on this evening and sharing with us his so impactful, powerful words about his father, who left an indelible impression on not just the survivors, our entire community, Yeshiva University, and the Jewish people. And we remember him with such fondness and love. And I want to thank our students. You're why we're here. You know, this is why we're here. And you organizing this and especially in this context, in this time, and you know, just expressing our values and who you are, just gives us great confidence in the future of the Jewish people. It would be hard to say any words after Moshe Avital, so I would like to continue his words, about how the Rishaim will never be successful. To continue his words about how 11 grandchildren and 11 brothers and sisters, and how 1.5 million children have died, and we have to live to replace them. And it's in this context that I think of a story that I mentioned at my investiture 3 years ago. A story that has particular resonance this evening on Yom HaShoah and in this time period. My wife's Bubby, Tzila Fenster, grew up in Poland. She was surrounded by loving families, very specifically her brother Pinchas. And she had a childhood friend who eventually she married, which was her husband Shlomo. When the Nazis came into Poland, Shlomo and Bubby and Tzila, they fled, and the Nazis killed their whole family. They fled into the woods, and they lived for years in the forests, foraging in the forests and in caves, running away from the Nazis. They lived for years that way. At the end of the war, they moved to Cuba, and when Castro came to power, they had to flee again and came to New York, came to America, came to New York. Sometime in the 80s, our Bubby, Tzila, receives a phone call from a friend who just came back from a trip from Russia. And her friend tells her, said, Tzila, you'll never believe this, but Pinchas, your brother, he's alive. Pinchas is alive. You fled one way and went one direction, he fled the other way and went to Russia, and they didn't know that they each thought that each other was dead. They connected by telephone, they spoke to each other, but Pinchas passed away before they were ever able to see each other again. Pinchas has a daughter named Gala. She married Vladimir, and they had a son, and they named him Pinchas. And when the Iron Curtain fell, they moved to Israel, and they made Aliyah. When I was studying in the Gris Kollel, Anita and I had our first child, our son, who we named Shlomo after Anita's grandfather. And Bubby came to Israel to see her grandson for the first time, to meet him at his bris. And when she was sitting there holding her new grandson, named Shlomo after her husband, all of a sudden, a woman walked in the room that had a distinct resemblance to her. And for the first time in her life, she met her niece, Gala. And then a little boy ran in, a little boy named Pinchas. And Pinchas came next to Bubby. And once again, Bubby was surrounded by Pinchas and Shlomo. The Nazis thought that they can kill us. They thought they'll kill Pinchas and Shlomo. But Pinchas and Shlomo were reborn. And once again, they surrounded Tzila. It's the next generation. It's what Moshe Avital said. 1.5 million Jewish children who died. And we are here to replace them and to continue their stories, to continue their legacy, and to continue their values. That's what we're here. It's a story that doesn't end. We're not just remembering the past. We're living and bringing the past into the future. That's what we're doing. And that's what Yom HaShoah reminds us so powerfully. And I would say that this year particularly, within this past month, when we've lost so many grandfathers and grandmothers, so many people of a generation that are cruelly being taken away from us, that we internalize this message of continuing the stories, the legacy, and the values of our generations. You know, we're here, Yeshiva University, commemorating, and I just can't help but mention that we're in the midst of Shiva, of our queen, Mrs. Mindy Lamb, who passed away from the coronavirus. A woman who dedicated her life to our community. We are here today because of the work that she and Yibadul L'Chaim Tovim and Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb did to establish and grow Yeshiva University. You know, we are here in the shoulders of giants. And our job is to continue what they built. And not just to continue, but to move it forward. To live a life of Torah, v'kiddush Hashem, living our values and bringing them out into the world. That's what we do. That's what our students do. And that's the continuity that gives us hope and confidence in our future. You know, at this moment in the program, I'll introduce the video of our students lighting candles, representing the memory of those that passed away. But our students lighting candles carries a much stronger message, because we don't just light the candles, we live the lives of those who passed away. We continue their lives and we continue their legacy. And we light because our students and our mission is to enlighten and to bring warmth and joy into this world. And that is the greatest way that we can remember the greatest sanctification of the names of those who passed. So I introduce the students of Yeshiva University, who will light the candles in memory of the Shoah.
El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bameromim Hametzei Menucha Nechona Al Kanevei HaShechina B'Ma'alos Kedoshim Utyarim Kizohar Rakiyah Mazirim Et Kol HaNeshamot Shel 6 Millionei HaYehudim Chalilei HaShoah B'Europa Shenergu Shenishchatu Shenisrufu V'shenismu Al Kiddush Hashem Bidei Amaratzachim HaGermanim HaNazim V'yozrem Misharamim Lachein Baal HaRachamim Yasirei B'Sezer Knafav Le'olamim V'yitzoroi B'tzirah Chayim Et Nishmoteim Adonai U'Nachalatam B'Gan Eden Tei Menuchatam V'yamdu L'goralam L'keitz hayamim V'lomar Amen.
A few hours ago, I was notified by co-president of SHEM, Student Holocaust Education Movement, Tanya Bobat, that she would be unable to participate at tonight's commemoration. I can tell you firsthand of the hard work Tanya put into creating tonight's event. She asked that I share with all of you her prepared remarks concluding tonight's program. Tonight, we are all connected by one goal: keeping the memory of those who passed alive in our hearts and in our minds. Not just the memory of what was lost, but the strength of those who worked and sacrificed to keep the Jewish community alive. We heard from Rabbi JJ Schacter, who spoke about his courageous father, Rabbi Herschel Schachter, an army chaplain and one of the liberators of the concentration and death camps across Europe. He was a man who brought light into the darkest of places and helped in the efforts to deliver freedom to those imprisoned in the camps. We listened in awe to the story of Dr. Moshe Avital, thanks to Names Not Numbers. He brought us back to the past and reminded us of the importance of family and keeping the Jewish community alive and flourishing. Finally, we heard from Rabbi Berman, who presented us the lighting of the 6 candles in memory of all that has been lost and all the communities that will continue to grow in spite of the evil that came before. Accompanied with this video was a beautiful rendition of Kalmaleh by Gedalia Penner. I'd like to thank them, as well as the Office of Student Life and everyone who made tonight possible. While this commemoration may be coming to an end, we hope that you take it upon yourselves to take a moment and remember in your own way. To not just let this night be a passive, fleeting moment where you participate and forget until next year. Unfortunately, many people, including Jews, question why we remember the Holocaust, why we allow such a tragic time in history to be a defining marker in Jewish life today, why we can't just forget about it and look to the future. After all, it is the past. And it is true the Holocaust happened and there's nothing we can do about it now. However, that's not the reason we remember. The Shoah reminds us what evil can come to grow when we allow it to. not just to the Jewish people, but to everyone in the world. It reminds us of the roles that bravery, compassion, tolerance, and faith have in our lives. So I challenge each and every one of you to just take a moment and think, how can I better and grow? Not only by keeping alive what was lost during the Shoah, but bringing a vibrancy back into Jewish culture and rich communities that were once alive, and to continue its growth today. Choose something like sitting with your family and learning about your own heritage, reading about the past, or just finding small changes in your everyday life to take this inspiration with you. We hope that this program succeeded in not only teaching about the Holocaust, but aided in helping you find a way to connect as well. And that wherever you are in the world, you are safe, healthy, and happy. Thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of the night.